Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending, of course, where you are. Welcome to this session of getting started with the Oracle Cloud Migration Service. My name is Richard Garsthagen, and today I will be joined with my colleague Ravindra Kumar, who also later on will be doing part of the presentation. During this session, we will be explaining to you on how you can actually use the Oracle Cloud Migration Service. We already have done a previous session that you can rewatch on YouTube that actually does a high overview of the session, but today we're really going to focus on showing you the actual service and how you actually can do a migration. But before we directly dive into that, let's do a very short recap of what this is all about. We as Oracle, of course, would like to help you relocate any of your virtual machines that you have today in your own data centers and move them into the Oracle Cloud, and preferably, of course, through an easy and automated fashion. Now, there are multiple strategies on how you can actually do that. There are multiple ways on how you can take your existing virtual machines and get them into the cloud environment. And it can be done by moving or migrating. And let me just explain the difference between the two and which one we will be talking about today. We have a moving strategy. And with a moving strategy, I mean that in the Oracle Cloud, you can run the same virtualization stack that you are running today in your own data center. So if you today are running VMware in your own data center, you can run VMware in our cloud, and therefore you can take a virtual machine and just move it from one VMware platform to the other VMware platform. And the virtual machine itself doesn't know it's being moved. It will see the same virtual machine hardware. It will keep on running exactly the same application. Nothing will actually literally change. And we can do that from VMware to VMware. We can do that from Hyper-V to Hyper-V. We can do that from KVM to KVM. The Oracle Cloud is actually the only public cloud available where you can run any of your own virtualization stacks yourself, allowing you to do that movement. Now, on the other side, we actually have the migration scenario. And the migration scenario is that we can take an existing on-premise virtual machine that is running, for instance, on the VMware platform, and we can automatically move that or migrate that into the Oracle Cloud and convert that into an Oracle Cloud native compute VM. And in the Oracle Cloud, we run KVM. So we will change the virtual machine hardware. We'll convert the disks of the virtual machine so that you can run it there. Now, there's a difference, of course, between both scenarios. Both have pros and both have cons. By moving a virtual machine, you still have to run your own virtualization platform. You still have to manage your own virtualization platform. And you'll be limited whatever the technical capabilities are of that virtualization platform. If you migrate your virtual machine into the Oracle Cloud, then suddenly you're really going to get the full power of the Oracle Cloud, being able to use all of the native services that we have there, all the flexibility that we have built into the cloud. You can use our flex shape, you can use our burstable or preemptible concepts. And also there is that when you power off a virtual machine, you actually stop the consumption of that virtual machine. In the case of when you move, when you're on your own virtualization stack, you're always paying not for the virtual machines, you're paying for the underlying physical infrastructure, the virtualization stack itself, the bare metal servers. And even if you start or stop virtual machines, you still keep paying for those bare metal servers. When you run in native OCI, you don't have all those kind of things. You have full flexibility. You can power something on, you pay for it, you power it off, you don't pay for it. So there's many scenarios where it makes a lot of sense to take your existing virtual machines and migrate them to this native OCI compute platform. And it is a migration. So the virtual machine will see different hardware, it will see different network card, it will see different SCSI driver and that kind of stuff. So we need to make sure that during the migration process, those things can be handled and taken care of so that it is actually an easy and automated way to move. So to enable this, we have a specific service, the Oracle Cloud Migration Service. And if you go into the Oracle Cloud, if you're familiar with the Oracle Cloud, you can go to the top left hand to the hamburger menu. And there in the list, you'll find a section called Migration and Disaster Recovery. And in there, you'll find that we actually have multiple migration services. We have a database migration service specifically focused on moving data from one database to a database in the Oracle Cloud. But the service we're talking about today is called the Cloud Migration Service. And that is to say, to migrate virtual machines from your on-premise environment into virtual machines that are native into the Oracle Cloud. So you can click on that migration service there, and you get to the landing page, and you'll see some steps that are defined there on how to work with that, and we'll explain those to you. Ravindra will actually take you through those steps today to show how that service works. What's probably very important to mention is that this service, very nice, is completely free of charge. So there is no cost in using this migration service itself. So of course, if you start putting your virtual machines in your cloud, you would have to pay for the virtual machines when you're running them and that kind of stuff, and for the storage that they consume. But the actual migration service itself is completely free for you to use. Now, before Ravindra actually will start talking to you on how to set up your tenancy, how to actually make the migration plans, let me at a high level first explain to you what a little bit the workflow of this service is. Because there's a few steps that the service actually will take care of. It's not just copying the virtual machine over. The first step that it actually starts off with is that you actually deploy a virtual appliance on your on-premise virtualization stack, on your on-premise VMware environment. And by putting a virtual machine that you can actually download from the Oracle Cloud into that on-premise VMware environment, the Oracle Cloud now gets access to your VMware environment. And that means based on there, it actually can create an inventory. So we can capture all the information about all the virtual machines that you're running in your own data center, and you'll be able to see that in the Oracle Cloud. And from there on, you can say, okay, I would like to take these 10 virtual machines. You can inspect how much resources they consume, the size of the virtual machines, and that kind of stuff. And based on that information, you can actually stake those virtual machines and build a migration plan. And in that migration plan, we put in all the logic that you can tell it how to convert, to what shape, to what size, and you can decide that yourself, or we have algorithms that allow you that we will automatically choose what size we think is best for that virtual machine. So we'll put that all together, and you can combine which virtual machines in one wave should be moved together towards the Oracle Cloud. Now, when you have built those migration plans, then the actual migration will actually start working. And we'll replicate the data of those virtual machines into the Oracle Cloud. And key thing here, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in detail, is that this can of course be done while the virtual machines are running. So while they're still running in your own data center, in the background, we can do the majority of the replication work. And that's being done, sent to the Oracle Object Storage Cloud Service. Ravindra will explain that a little bit later. And then later on, when the actual replication is completely done, we'll convert that into an OCI block volume disk. That's actually the normal disk format that we use for normal virtual machines in the Oracle Cloud. And then when that's all done, we will automatically create a Terraform script that you can use with Resource Manager, our Terraform as a service in the Oracle Cloud, that will then spin up that environment. So if you have like a migration plan with 25 virtual machines in it, it will automatically spit out a Terraform file that has all those 25 machines, and you can then spin that up in the Oracle Cloud just for testing purposes, for instance. So you can still leave the on-premise running and test it out and see if it works. If you're happy with it, you can delete it. It's Terraform, so it's one click, it's gone again. And then you can do one final replication cycle and do it. Or if you need to make any changes and that kind of stuff, you can take care of that. So you can really have a few cycles in testing, analyzing, and then finally do an actual cutover of taking care of them. So that is what the Oracle Cloud Migration Service at a very high level takes care of. The entire process of getting the inventory, doing the assessment on how to convert, making a migration plan, transforming the data, and then actually launching that into the Oracle Cloud. But of course, to get this going, you do need to set up your tenancy first. You do need to give your tenancy access to the Oracle Cloud Migration Service. That's actually something that you can control yourself if that service is allowed to do things in your tenancy. So let me hand it over to Ravindra, who will take you through those steps of getting your tenancy ready and how you can actually start using the service. Ravindra, over to you. Let me stop here.
Thank you so much, Richard, for great introduction. Please allow me few seconds time to share my slide, and then we will start, how to set up our tenancy and how it will work, how to set up the policies. Just bear with me for a couple of seconds. All right. So before I start, representing, how we will set up our tenancy. So there is a great introduction which has been given by Richard, and if you will see that there are the different steps which has been covered in our previous video which has been delivered by Richard, and now we will be going through a step-by-step process how we can set up our tenancy, how we will enable this service to communicate to your own premises environment, and how we can migrate the VMware-based workloads at present to your Oracle Cloud native infrastructure. So let us go and start it. So going forward, we will be covering setting up the tenancy and what all things we need to set up our tenancy to work with our own premises vSphere-based environment, and how we will deploy the OCB agent, and what all steps we need to cover as a prerequisites, and what all things we need to set up while we will be discovering our virtual machines which are currently running in your own premises vSphere environment, and then we will be creating and executing the migration plans as per our strategy, or as per the strategy customer wants to migrate. And like it might be that they want to migrate the virtual machines in different phases, so we will be covering that part as well. So while we talk about setting up our tenancy, so there are the different prerequisites which we need, and these are the ones which we should take care before we set up our tenancy. So we should have the active tenancy which customer will have where they want to migrate their workload. We need to have a compartment. That compartment might be the existing one, and you can use or you can create the new one also. We will be covering these parts going forward. There is automation also which we can use to set up your compartment, set up your OCM and IAM related policies, and we need to take care while we are setting up. Then our own premises environment should be at least running with vSphere 6.5 and above. Otherwise, it will not support that. And there is other part which is vSphere VDDK kit, which we require as a prerequisites, because it will help your OCB agent to connect with your virtual machines, for which we will be taking the snapshots, and to migrate those snapshots and the virtual machine files to your OCI storage bucket. So here it comes, the storage bucket. We need to create a private object storage bucket in our OCI tenancy. It will help you to store the data, store the virtual machine snapshots, which we will be migrating and replicating from on-premises to OCI. And the next step is a vault to store VC credentials. To communicate your OCB agent to your OCI tenancy, and to make the communication allow, we need a virtual center server credentials, which will be created in your OCI tenancy, and you will be setting up your username and password, by which we will be communicating to our on-premises environment to the vCenter server. So this will be stored again in your OCI tenancy itself in a vault. So as we discussed that we need the active tenancy, so this is how we can refer to our tenancy. We will log into our Oracle Cloud infrastructure login page, and we will go to the administration, and we can see the tenancy details which we need to set up. So like we discussed in previous tab and that explained by my colleague Richard, we need to set up different things in while we are setting up Oracle Cloud migration service. So in continuation to that flow, we are having an automation way which will help you to set up your tenancy automatically by automation, and that will be done by a stack which is based on the Terraform. So what it will do, it will create the compartment for yourself. You don't need to create these manually. It will create the OCI vault also. So why do we need these things? The compartment is a logical separation of the resources which you want to deploy, and it depends on what basis you want to segregate your resources which are running in OCI. It might be related to a particular department. It might be related to a particular business unit. So you can create that, and you can control access to that particular compartment also. OCI Vault and Key, as I discussed that while we will be configuring our OCB agent, and it will communicate to your OCI tenancy. Then to make this communication enable, we need to have the vCenter server credentials, which will help you and which will allow you to communicate with on-premises vCenter server. Object storage bucket, as I explained, that we need this bucket to store your virtual machine data and the files which will be replicated from your on-premises to OCI tenancy. And the mandatory service policies, as I discussed, that it will be creating the IAM and OCM related policies to communicate to your OCI tenancy and to different a different set of services like object storage, like VCN, and you to your OCM service also. So it will be creating these all things by automation, and we can download that script from this given link, and which will be shared by later also, and it is available Oracle GitHub repository. We will be covering that, how we will do that, and how the steps will work going forward. As you can see that we can download this code from this GitHub repository, and it is having the complete information what all things it will be creating while we will be deploying that stack in our Oracle Cloud Infrastructure tenancy. We will go to this page, we will go to code, then it will give us the option to download that, and we can download it as a zip file. Once this zip file is downloaded, it will be stored in your local machine, from where you can access your OCI tenancy. And then we will go to the hamburger icon, then we will search hamburger menu, and then we will search for the stacks, and we can find the RMS stacks and resource manager source there. In this, we will go to the stacks, and we will select the create new stack. Once we will go to this option, then we will have the options from where we want to upload that automation script and the Terraform script to deploy the necessary things like IAM policies and object storage and so on, which we discussed. We will go to the browse, and we will provide the path where are that zip file for the Terraform script to deploy the resources in OCI tenancy. We will browse that, and we will open that. Once that is done, our tenancy is ready to proceed further to create OCM related services and things which we need to cover. So for doing that, we need to create a source environment which we can access by going to hamburger icon and then cloud migration services, and then we can refer to that, to source environment, remote connection, source environment, and then we will create this source environment. Why do we need source environment? We are creating a source environment here from where we will be migrating the virtual machines from your on-premises vSphere based data center to your Oracle Cloud infrastructure. So we will provide a name as per might be your location where your DC exists. So it depends on you, what name you want to give. So you can identify that this source environment belongs to that particular data center or that particular vCenter server. We will select the compartment where this source environment will be created, and we will go ahead and create that. Once this source environment is created, so now it comes to about the OCB agent. So as we can see on the screen, to download the OCB agent, we need to go inside that source environment which we have created, and we will download the agent VM from this console or from the OCI tenancy console inside your cloud migration, remote connections, and source environment, and your source environment which you have created under remote connection agent. So this agent will be a OVA which will be downloaded again to locally to your system where you have you are from where you are accessing your OCI tenancy. So once that is downloaded, so it will be a OVA file which will be downloaded. Then we need to deploy that OVA agent in our vCenter server. Before we proceed to deploy the OCB agent OVA in our vCenter server, there are certain prerequisites which we need to follow to enable the communication between your OCB agent and your vCenter server. So we need to deploy the OCB agent in a network from where it can reach out to your vCenter server and it can resolve the DNS names of your vCenter server as well as your ESXi host, which will help to taking the snapshot and which will allow to communicate your OCB agent to different uh, services like vCenter server, ESXi host, and to your virtual machines as well. Apart from that, there is one more adapter which we need to make it enable to access your OCI tenancy. That means it needs internet access. So it depends on you, because in production we always like to keep it separate. You can configure it with single network card also, which has access to internet as well as to your vCenter server. Once these prerequisites are matched, then we will deploy the OCB agent OVA in our vCenter server. Once we will deploy this, we can assign the IP address to this OCB agent OVA with manually, and we can enable the DHCP as well. So once the OCB agent is deployed, it will establish the connection with your vCenter server, and then we need to register this OCB agent with our tenancy. So as I discussed earlier, we can deploy the OVA as we do deploy general OVA while we are deploying any virtual machine. You will go to your vCenter server, you will right click on your cluster, and you will deploy OVA template. And then you need to provide the information about the different options. With different options are available by the name, template name, and we can see that how much storage, and this will be picked by automatically as per the recommendation. And then we need to define the networks where we want to deploy this. As we can see, I have used two networks here. One is the external network and one is the internal network. So in internal network is the network which will allow my OCB agent virtual machine to communicate with your vCenter server and its other components like ESXi host and to your going forward to your virtual machines. Then I have another network that is external, which is having the internet access, which will allow my agent to communicate with our OCI tenancy. So once that is done, we need to register our agent with our OCI tenancy. So for doing that, we need to access the OCB agent VM with the help of the IP address which it has got or which we have assigned it manually, and we need to use port 3000. We need to make sure that this port should be enabled while you are accessing, while you are registering this agent from the network where this is deployed to your OCI tenancy. You will provide a remote agent and a display name. So display name you can provide according to the location and the vCenter server where you have deployed this. So it depends on you which name you want to give, so you can recognize this. Also, you can do one thing which which will help you to identify this agent. If you could put some last range of the IP, so for which agent you are registering to which source environment, it will help you to identify that. So you will select the region, in which region you want to deploy. After providing the display name, then we need to proceed further. We will select the display name. Like I said, we need to select the display name and the region, and then we will register it. While you will register this, it will ask you to log into your tenancy. Since I was already logged in, so it didn't ask me, but it will ask you to provide your credentials to your tenancy where you want to register this. So once it is done, we will select the right compartment where we have created the source environment. Once this is selected, we will register this, and this will be registered with your OCI, with your source environment, which is created in OCI tenancy. As you can see that I have provided this name. So this is the agent which had been registered here. we need to make sure that this agent state and heartbeat should be healthy to make it enable to communicate with your vCenter server and to your OCI tenancy and vice versa. And for identifying that, there are 3 different plugins which we need to check out. Also, you will go inside this remote agent which has been registered, and you will find that there are the 3 plugins: discovery, agent monitoring, and replication. As we can identify by the name also, this is the plugin which will help our OCB agent to discover the virtual machines inside the vCenter server where we have deployed this. And this agent health monitoring, it will help you to tell about the health of the agent VM which has been deployed, OCB agent, in our vCenter server. Replication agent will help you to replicate the data from on-premises to OCI tenancy. So once that is done and we identify that everything is in healthy status, then we will go ahead and create the asset source. So what this asset source will do, we are pointing our OCM service to our vCenter server from where it will get the information about the assets. Assets is your virtual machine which will be discovered while we will be running the discovery. So first of all, we need to set up that. To set up that, we need to provide a name. Again, we can provide the name as per our choice. Then we can provide vCenter server endpoint and this URL with the FQDN of complete vCenter server, followed by HTTPS : and then FQDN, then : 443, and then SDK. Again, you need to provide the compartment. So this is the compartment where our OCM service is running, and the target compartment. Target compartment will be the compartment where you want to migrate your workloads, where it will be running once the migration will be done. And we need to provide the source name, source environment name, which we have created. So it will be communicating to that agent. So we are providing, or we are pointing our OCM service to fetch the information on the basis of the things which we have configured. So once this is done, we will go to the cloud migration and discovery asset source details, and we will run the discovery. So this discovery will run, it will communicate to your vCenter server, and it will fetch the information about all the assets which are part of that vCenter server. And that that list can be identified under the assets, which we can see on the left side. But before we run the discovery, we need to make sure that this discovery and replication connection should be in active state. If it is not in active state, then the discovery will be fail. We need to make sure it should be in active state. So once the discovery is done, we can identify the information about the discovered virtual machines inside assets, which option you can see on the left side, which we will be seeing later on. So once that is done, then we need to create a migration project. So migration project will help you to define which all virtual machine you want to migrate as per your migration strategy. We will create we'll select on create migration project. We will provide the display name and the compartment. So now the assets which we have discovered as a part of discovery, we need to select that asset which we want to migrate. So in this case, we will select add from OCM inventory, and this inventory is the list of the virtual machine which are running inside your vCenter server. This wizard will open from where we can select the virtual machine which we want to migrate as per our migration strategy. Once that is done, you will select the virtual machine. Like I have selected this virtual machine, I want to migrate this for this particular presentation, and I will make sure that it should be selected here also, and I will see that this virtual machine is listed and how many virtual machines and assets are there. So it is there, and you can see the information about in which bucket it will be migrated, in which region it will go, and in which compartment it will be going. So you can identify this information from here. Once that is done, we will come back to the project migration project details, and we will see the migration assets which we have selected to to migrate or replicate the data. We will select this and we will go to the actions. We will select replicate and it will start the replication. You can select replicate from here also, but it will replicate all the virtual machines which are listed and inside under this migration assets. If you have multiple virtual machine and you want to replicate particular one, then you need to select that particular one and then replicate. And you can see the progress of the replication inside cloud migration projects and work request. It will give you the information about the progress of migration, progress of the replication in percentage. Once it is done, you can verify the progress also in your vCenter server itself. You will be able to see that in your virtual in vCenter server, the virtual machine which you have selected for that OCM service is taking the snapshot, which we can identify here. Okay, and once that is done, it will bring us to this page. So this page is will come here while this replication is complete and we have the data in our object storage bucket. To deploy that automatically and by the automation, we will generate a RMS stack. This RMS stack will help you to create the virtual machine as per your strategy and as per the location which you have selected. Like we discussed, we can we can define the target compartments also, or you can change the compartment to different compartment also. So we will generate the RMS stack. Once this RMS stack is generated, it will give you the option to deploy this RMS stack. So you will select to deploy the RMS stack. This RMS stack will be performing all the backend tasks like conversion of virtual machine, copy the virtual machine, virtual machine files to create an instance. So once that is done, you can identify the cost of this virtual machine which will be converted, which we can see here with the asset compatibility. You can also track the progress of your RMS stack deployment inside your resource manager stacks, stack details and job details. It will give you the complete information of the steps which it is performing to deploy the virtual machine. And once this is done, you can destroy that also. Suppose you want to destroy the virtual machine which has been created as a part of that also can be destroyed. There might be the reasons that virtual machine is not running fine. There might be some issues with the virtual machine. So you can destroy that also from the same console where we applied. So it can be destroyed also from there. As you can see that we have migrated the virtual machine and it is running inside our OCI tenancy. We can see the shapes also, which shape it is running, what is the amount of CPU's memory and in which availability domain, and in FD it is running. And we can identify this in compute instance also. It will help you to identify your virtual machine, where it is running currently and what all things it has got. It has got which IP it has got, in which subnet and which VCN. These things we can define and we can change also if we want to change also. We want to deploy this in different VCN in different compartment that can be changed. Once this virtual machine is done and it's replicated and you can see this under instances, you can log into that virtual machine by using the cloud shell, and you can log in this and identify that if it is working fine. If it is Windows based, then you can use RDP for that. So we can see the virtual machine has been deployed now. Once this is done, we need to mark this migration project as complete because our virtual machine has we have migrated that, so it will stop to resync the data with your on-premises. So we need to migrate this as complete also. So this is how we will configure our OCM service, and I will be handing over this to my colleague Richard. He will be taking care of from further from here about the replication option. Over
Thank
to
you. Thanks very much, Ravindra. Yeah, so it might seem all complex and a lot of work, but keep in mind the majority of the entire setup of the Oracle Cloud Migration Service is something you just do once, right? And after that, it is actually a very easy process of making the migration plans and sending the virtual machines over. But there are a few catches that you need to make that you have to take care of. Instead, it is a migration, and there are some things that you need to do depending on the operating system and that kind of stuff to make sure that your migrations are successful. So let me discuss those two topics with you. The first one actually is about replication itself. There are actually two replication options that you can have. If you just run standard normal VMware, you haven't done anything special, the way and how the replication will work is that every time that when you hit replicate or when there's a schedule to replicate the virtual machine, on-premise in the VMware environment, the virtual machine will get snapshot, and that entire disk is sent over into the Oracle Cloud towards the object storage. And by the way, all this traffic goes always from on-premise to the cloud. You never have to open up any kind of network connectivity to your on-premise data center. All communication is always initiated from the on-premise appliance towards the cloud. So there's no opening up firewalls or anything like that. So that is allows for very easy implementation in your environment. Now, this method of replication, of course, is not the most efficient method. So there is another method that we highly suggest that you use, and that is by enabling VMware's functionality called block tracking. And block tracking allows a virtual machine's disk to record which blocks are being changed. And by enabling this on a virtual machine, it means that every time when we do a replication cycle, we can just replicate the delta, the changes that have been made since the last replication cycle. So if you have a virtual machine that's like a 100 gigabyte disk, the first time, of course, it will send over the 100 gigabyte data. And then later on, if you make any changes to that virtual machine, even if it's just small changes, every time then when you replicate, only those small changes are being sent over. For some reason, I see it's on the slide wrong. There's a knowledge base article link here. We'll send out the slides so that you know how to enable this. But let me actually show you how this is actually done. So if you have a virtual machine that you want to have this change block tracking enabled for, so this is in your own on-premise VMware environment, in your virtual center environment, you can go to that virtual machine, click on the Actions menu and go to Edit Settings. It is not just something that's in the main menu. You have to go to the VM Options setting and then click on the Advanced Options. From there, you have to scroll down and there is Edit Configuration. And in here, you actually can make this change. So by default, this is not enabled. So you do have to really specifically enable this for your virtual machine. There's two things that you need to enable. So you can just say add a configuration parameter. And the first thing that you add is that change block tracking, CTK, is enabled. And that enables it for the entire virtual machine. But then you have to actually enable it for every single virtual disk of that virtual machine. And you do that by specifying the disk's controller and the disk ID. So SCSI00 is your first disk, and say again CTK enabled and set that to true. So it's a little bit cumbersome to configure, but if you want to have this change block tracking, if you want to have this delta only, the changes only form of replication, which is a superior way of doing it, you do need to go through these steps. And now, what is important to understand about this is that if you have done this actually, to enable this, to have this actually enabled, the virtual machine does need to reboot. So just be aware of that. And as I said, if you have multiple disks, you need to add SCSI 0.1 and SCSI 0.2, or if you have multiple disks on different controllers, you need to match those numbers up. But after you've done that, you have this concept of change replication. So OCM will automatically use this functionality when change block tracking is enabled. And so the first cycle will take of course, significantly longer, but every other additional cycle will suddenly go extremely fast because it would just be based on the changes that have been made. Now, the second step to really be successful with your migrations is to make sure that you prepare your operating system so it can deal with being taken from a VMware platform and suddenly run in the Oracle Cloud natively on a KVM platform. And it depends a little bit on what operating system that you're running on, what steps you have to do here. So if we first start about Linux, with Linux operating systems, driver-wise, you should have no issues. Almost every single Linux distribution automatically ships with drivers for the virtual.io KVM driver. So the drivers that will be presented, the hardware, the virtual machine hardware that will be presented in OCI, those drivers in every single Linux distribution should already be available. So you have no problem there whatsoever that Linux puts up. But most Linux operating systems have their networking configured based on the driver, the specific hardware driver of the networking card. So, for instance, this is a screenshot of a Ubuntu virtual machine, but you'll see the same in many other Linux flavors, that my network card here is configured to something called an ENS 160. And an ENS 160 actually is the VMXNet 3 driver that VM represents to up to a virtual machine as its network card driver. So if I would take this virtual machine and I power it on in OCI, it will perfectly fine power on, and it will have a network configuration for an ENS 160 driver. But that hardware is not present in OCI because in OCI, it's a different virtualization stack, we will be presenting the virtual machine up to an ENS 3 driver. And within Linux, this hardware is not configured yet. So while your virtual machine actually powers on, it will fully operate and function, you won't likely have network connectivity to it because there is no network configuration for that specific driver. So the easiest way to fix that is if you just go to your virtual machine. So while it's still on-premise, so you can fix it after as well, but the easiest way to do it is before you do the migration, is that you just go to the network configuration of your on-premise virtual machine. And in this case, this is Ubuntu, it's controlled to NetPlan, but of course, depending on what operating system, what flavor of Linux you're running, figure out on how to configure its networking. And I can just make a change here. So here, I'm actually not making it here, I'm making an addition. So I can leave the current network settings intact. So nothing changes for the on-premise environment, it keeps happily running and all that kind of stuff. But all I do is I just add an extra entry in here saying that, hey, by the way, if there is an ENS3 driver that you see, something that in OCI happens, configure it. And in my case, I'll just say configure it with DHCP, so the OCI will give it an IP address. If you do want to use static IP addresses, you can do it as well. You need to make sure, of course, that that matches what is going to happen in OCI. But the easiest thing would be to just use DHCP for the OCI side, so OCI can handle the IP addresses of your virtual machines. Now, after you've done this, you're good to go. If you now migrate that virtual machine over, it will have a network configuration for the network card that we present in OCI, and you should have no problem directly network connecting to that. Now, there is, of course, a chance that you forget this, and I've forgotten this many times to prepare this. So if you have forgotten to set up the right networking, how can you deal with this? Well, option number one would be saying, again, if you have change block tracking enabled, is that you just go back to your on-premise VM. So you've done the migration, you forgot setting this up, you powered on, you see you don't have network connectivity. No worry, you just go to your on-premise VM, make this little change, hit replicate. Within a minute, the changes are being sent over, and then you can repower on the virtual machine in OCI. So that probably is the easiest way to fix it, by always fixing it on the source side. If for some reason, maybe because you didn't have change block tracking enabled and that kind of stuff, you don't want to change it on the source side, but you want to change it while it's now moved to OCI, you do always have that option as well. As Ravindra already was showing, in the Oracle Cloud, we can always give you a remote console session, and we can give that text-based for Linux-based virtual machines, and even graphical-based for Windows virtual machines. And that graphical console, the remote console session, will always work. It has no dependency on networking. It has no dependency if the operating system even functions or whatsoever. So even if a machine is blue screened or whatever, you can always get to see the remote console session and interact with that in the OCI console. So in case you had a virtual machine that you forgot setting this up and it has already been migrated and you don't want to go through that cycle, you can just go to that virtual machine. And if you scroll down on the menu, you'll see on the left side this option called console connection. Now, a lot of people always sometimes get confused here. You'll also see in that same menu there, it says console history, but console history just shows you what the last things was that the console was presented. And an operating system needs to be configured for that to output to serial. So don't click on console history. It's not interactive. It doesn't allow you to fix anything. You have to go to the console connection option in the menu. From there, you can just or make a remote console session using an SSH session. But the easiest way to launch Cloud Shell and do a console session, so you click just on the launch Cloud session and you get this session. It will build up a console session. It will launch this into the Cloud Shell. And then you typically get stuck at this screen, or at least a lot of people I always find get stuck at this screen. Now it has made a remote console session, but as you can see here on the screenshot, nothing is really happening. You have to imagine it is now connected to that screen, but there is no updates on that screen being sent or anything. So you don't see anything. So you have to actually hit enter in that window, like you would normally do on a computer. You hit enter, and then you can actually get the login prompt. So whenever you get this screen and you're just blank and you're waiting, like, hey, there's nothing happening, click on the window, hit enter, and you should get a login prompt. And then you can just log into that Linux VM. You can go to its network settings, change the network card to ENS3, or add an additional network card to ENS3, do a net apply, a net plan apply, and your VM should be good to go. And also this allows you, of course, to do troubleshooting if you can ping other resources, if you have network connectivity and that kind of stuff. So most ideal is prepare your Linux operating systems up front. Make sure that there is an ENS3 driver present. And if not, you can afterwards always go fix it after it has been migrated into the Oracle Cloud. And that really allows you to flawlessly move any kind of Linux virtual machine from on-premise into the cloud. Now then, of course, there's Windows. And Windows has another problem. Windows absolutely has no issue with network cards changing. If you add a new network card, Windows will automatically configure it, automatically use DHCP, so you don't have to go through that process. But with Windows, there is a new problem, is that Windows actually does not ship by default with Virtual I/O KVM drivers. So that means that even though I can migrate my Windows virtual machines over, when they power on in OCI, and if you haven't prepared your Windows operating systems, you would get the lovely blue screen that your virtual machine is not able to boot because it doesn't have a SCSI driver for the SCSI controller that is being presented to it. It won't have a network card driver for it and that kind of stuff. So very, very easy. How do you fix this? For Windows, you do always need to prepare your Windows VM before you migrate. And how do you do that? Simple, you just Google Oracle Virtual I/O drivers. That will take you to our documentation page directly where you can read about all these drivers and that kind of stuff. And more importantly, where you can get this. So on edelivery.oracle.com, you'll be able to download these Virtual I/O drivers. This is a simple thing, Windows. You just download the driver inside your virtual machine when it is still on-premise before the migration. You run the drivers, click next, 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 finish. And you're good to go. So this has pre-installed now the drivers. It doesn't change anything about your current Windows configuration. It doesn't break anything or anything like that. So you can safely do this inside your Windows virtual machine. And then you can do the migration. And again here, if you did forget this on the first cycle, and if you have change blocking enabled, no worry. Just go back to your on-premise virtual machine, download the drivers, install the drivers, do a resync of the virtual machine, and again, only the changes that will be sent over, and you should see that the virtual machine should have no problem powering on back into the Oracle Cloud. So hopefully this gives you all the basic information on how you can set up your tenancy, how you can get going and create migration plans, get the inventory and all that kind of stuff, and of course make sure that you prepare your operating systems so that the migration can be successful. Now, if you want any more information, just go to our official documentation page, docs.oracle.com, click on compute. Under the compute section, you find Cloud Migration Service, and you find the full documentation of the Oracle Cloud. So thank you very much for listening and attending this session, and hopefully we'll use this service successfully. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the day.